Well, for more on the China-EU trade and investment ties, earlier I spoke with Remi Piet, the research associate at the European Union Center with the University of Miami. I started by asking him how the perception of Chinese investors has changed when it comes to investing in Europe.
I mean, it does lie somewhere in between. We've seen a strong progress from the Chinese side, also changing a series of penalties that we've seen in the past against, for example, imports from French beef, and also a series of different manufactured goods from other countries in Europe. But indeed, there's been this narrative amongst the European elites that there was unfair competition from China, some social dumping issues, some impossibility for European companies to compete freely and fairly on the Chinese market. And that's why it's so important for China and the European Union to intensify collaborations and talks to be able to find some kind of common ground for increased trade at a time where the Trump administration is intensifying also the trade war with China.
So coming out of this meeting, both sides have agreed to more multilateralism. What is different about this meeting than the ones in 2016 and 17?
There's a series of things. First of all, we've seen a series of progress of collaboration between China and the European Union on different topics, such as, for example, climate change adaptation and mitigation, issues of foreign policy, and we're seeing more and more common ideas on the normative front for European renewable energies development. But also, if we look really at the last few weeks, obviously the conflict with the Trump administration, the rise of tariffs on key imports towards the American markets has brought good reasons for both China and the European Union to find some common ground here. The Trump administration calling the European Union a foe on trade issues were at a time where usually the Americans and Europeans were able to develop common platforms on free trade, has obviously pushed the European Union towards Beijing and possibly made the European Union and Beijing key partners for trade issues here.
Has there been real progress coming out of this meeting? I mean, are they able to go to President Trump and say, look, you're the bad actor. We were able to find common ground here.
There's been some progress. It's going to have to be steady progresses, and obviously you don't build bridges between two parties that have not been traditional allies on issues of trade from one day to the next. But obviously seeing the declaration from Donald Tusk, the different positions from the Chinese elites on trying to build bridges and finding common ground with the European Union is obviously some good signs for the near future. It will take some time, but definitely if the Trump administration remains so adamant about building protectionism, that's not going to be in the best interest of both the US and also the European Union, but the world in the global scene, then definitely we will see the European Union work more and more with the Chinese government. It will take some time, but definitely the road is on its way.
Is there something that you can specifically point to that shows that the dispute between the U.S. and China is directly impacting talks between the EU and China?
I mean, you do see, I gave the example recently on beef imports. There was an embargo on exports from France to China on beef. This has been changed and reversed over the last few weeks, not only with from imports from the European Union, also we've seen from key South American countries. We've seen more imports from Bolivia to export beef to China. And it's definitely in direct retaliation with the different policies from the Trump administration and the rise of potential tariffs on farming goods from the U.S. So we're seeing now more and more intensification of partnering and trade from European and other countries to be able to offset reduction of imports from the United States.
Why isn't there more input from the WTO?
The WTO right now is in a situation of it's never been the first actors on trade dispute. I mean, it's usually a resolution actor. It's a fixing regimes for free trade, but it's not a first pioneer actor to step in when there's a dispute. It takes some time to be able to investigate trade disputes, and eventually a few years down the road, which actually was a key criticism from people that would say that it's actually obsolete. But right now, we'll see eventually WTO being a place for consultation and negotiations, but you won't see a first reaction from WTO. It's usually arriving further down the road.
A statement from Beijing said that the two sides agreed to jointly work to safeguard the rules-based international order, promote multilateralism, and support free trade. Is that how you would best sum up what they agreed on moving forward?
Yes, absolutely. And you have to understand also that this idea of free trade has different meanings, but actually collaboratively work hand in hand in China and in Europe. For Europe, free trade is a key tool to be able to maintain world peace. That's actually the funding of the European Union itself. Developing trade to prevent war. That's what happened from the Truman Declaration in the 1940s and further on. In a Chinese perspective, it's mainly for economical interests, and China needs to maintain its strong position in trade issues to be able to export key production and prevent and ensure growth that is necessary needed for the economic growth of the country. But both, therefore, from political reasons in the European Union and for economic reasons in China, there's this idea that free trade should be fostering more collaboration between the two countries.